Hey. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast of the Complete Personal Trainer. Today, going to be talking about all the things you can do to bring up a specific body part. So a lot of time when we're training for hypertrophy, for muscle growth, or even for performance aspects, there can quite often be a muscle that's holding it back. So with, for powerlifting, for example, we can find glutes maybe holding back a lift. We might find quads, we find chest, it could be triceps, it doesn't really matter. There's always something that's going to be held back at some point. So what we need to do is we need to understand all the different things that we can take care of and we can work with when we're trying to deal with a stubborn body part that won't grow. So today I want to talk about the basics that we need to look at, so the training point of view, the programming point of view, but then also the neurological and the metabolic factors that are going to lead to poor muscle growth for a lagging body part. So we'll dive right in. So when you have a poor body part, or a body part that's not responding to training, the most important thing that you can do is to identify what good training technique is for those exercises, and then also making sure that the exercises that have been selected are ideal for that person's unique biomechanical structure, meaning they get no joint discomfort during the exercise, they get a good pump in the target muscle tissue, and they can progressively overload and get stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, that's the number one thing that you need to do. And a lot of people don't do this when we're looking at a lagging body part. The main thing that I see people do is they go to, oh, it's not growing. Let's give it more volume. Let's give it more stimulus to try and incur more and more hypertrophy. And that is a very short-sighted way of doing things. Now, intuitively, it totally makes sense. I totally get it. You got a muscle part that's not growing. Let's say it's biceps, for lack of a better term, or for lack of an easier muscle to demonstrate on the video. And you're doing curls, you're doing like 9 sets a week, for example, but you're getting no growth. I'd want to first make sure that you're getting the most out of the exercises that you're doing. So are you following a solid tempo for that? Are you performing the exercise in a way that can be repeated the same way each and every week so you can progressively overload it and get stronger in that movement pattern? If you're not getting stronger with the same form, the same range of motion, the same tempo, the same technique overall, you are not progressively overloading that muscle. So this is where standardizing your exercise form and exercise execution is so important. So many people don't do this. They just, oh, I'm going to throw the weights up, I'm going to do different week to week. You should have a consistent cadence that you follow, a consistent range of motion, a consistent approach to the exercise to get the most out of it before you start throwing in extra body part training for that body part. Oh, I'm going to throw in another biceps day or another biceps day. There was a theory a couple of years ago that because smaller body parts, like smaller muscle groups relative to body mass, I'm not saying they're small, biceps are smaller than glutes, that's pretty obvious, respond or recover faster from training. Now that makes no sense because the muscle fibers themselves are exactly the same size. They start at the same place, they got the same structure, the same architecture. Their pennation may be different, but really it shouldn't make a difference at all for that. So with frequency, it's something that throwing in more frequency is not necessarily better. We need to make sure that first of all, we're getting enough stimulus and if you're progressing in that. So that's the training part, and that's what we can do in the gym. Now, the next things we need to look at is neurological and metabolic factors in growing a muscle. So with neurological factors for a muscle, some people are quite simply not great at recruiting and stimulating a particular muscle in a training lift. So there's a number of reasons for that. There could be some form of issue with the spine. It could be a cerebellar issue, which is neurological, very much neurological. There's a lot of things there that we can't affect. But what we can do is we can do certain things to facilitate better neurological recruitment patterns of muscle, better activation patterns, better sequences, all types of things. So let's go through a few of them. The first thing you want to do is support neurochemistry with supplementation, particularly using alpha GPC and maybe something like the Bacopa or there's another one that's skipped my brain, always skips my brain, this one, but Hubazine, before a workout, about 30 to 45 minutes beforehand, so we can start seeing some of the effects of that. What they're going to do is increase muscle unit recruitment and motor unit recruitment. So what that means is you have more capacity to recruit said muscle fibers. These exercises should be put first in the workout because that's when you're most neurologically fresh, obviously, because you haven't trained, and you can apply a higher degree of attention to that exercise because you have more fuel availability, so you can actually do the exercise better. So pre-workout, if someone has neurological issues recruiting a muscle, besides looking at the exercises and making sure that they can do it okay, we need to make sure that they've got the correct supplementation in place. So something, the alpha GPC being my number one go-to, with the other two, huperzine and bacopa, being secondaries. And then we want to do something that stimulates neuroplasticity, so the growth of new neurons. So this could be something like juggling, either with your hands or with your feet, playing the Elevate app on the iPhone. That's one of my favorites because it's very simple to do. Anyone has an iPhone or a smartphone, they can do it. Writing in cursive, musical instruments, something like that before the gym to stimulate the growth of new nerve cells. Now, we can say that neurological growth doesn't happen during the day, and it doesn't. It happens at night as our brain recovers and repairs itself during sleep. But what it does do is it does increase electrical firing rates and firing potentials in the brain. So from here, when we're doing something to stimulate neuroplasticity, we have the chemistry in place to stimulate better nerve signals and nerve contractions. We're going to get better performance outcomes. I have used this strategy to improve people's freestyle, to improve basketball shooting myself, to improve muscle recruitment in a number of people with great success. So this is one of those things where people hear it and they go, what the fuck are you talking about? It seems ridiculous. But when they try it out, within 1 to 2 sessions, they immediately notice the difference because they have a better neurological recruitment of muscles. Also, I would add caffeine into that supplement stack as a synergist, and because caffeine is cool. Now, finally, the last thing is metabolic factors to a muscle. And this is going to come in more for advanced trainees rather than beginner trainees. So what we would need to do is sometimes muscles don't grow because they simply don't recover enough. So what we can do is we can super saturate the muscle with high amounts of food on that particular day to encourage higher amounts of recovery there. And we can do different strategies to optimize insulin utilization on those days. This will depend on if you use performance enhancing supplements, substances or not. So using exogenous insulin is actually a useful strategy here in some cases. That's something that you're not to be trifled with because exogenous insulin can be very, very dangerous. What you can do is before workout, you can have a high carbohydrate meal, really high in carbs, lots of sodium in it as well, and then have that meal with some chromium and some sodium capsules. What will happen then is that will basically increase insulin sensitivity quite acutely as you have the meal, as you have the food, and you're more likely to get some of that glycogen deposited in your muscles. Now, generally, because we're doing it pre-workout, this is going to be a systemic approach. So it's going to lead to a higher level of muscle cell glucose saturation. Now, from there, what we want to do is we want to then do the same thing post-workout. So post-workout, same type of thing. High amount of carbs, anywhere from 100, 200 grams of carbohydrates if you're really serious about this. Taking sodium supplementation, taking what was the other supplement? Chromium supplementation, chromium picolinate. You can throw in some other substances there as well, which we won't dive into too much. And from there, what's going to happen is you're going to get saturation of the cells again from glucose, and it's going to go to the muscles that were trained first in the session. That's what recovers first. So that is a really cool tool to do. On that day as well, that's when you should place your free meals. So I like to call them free meals or G-flex meals, depending on or D-flex, trying to flex dopamine. What you can do here is have high calorie amounts on those days, for lack of a better term. And the same supplementation approaches apply. Having sodium and chromium with those meals will help improve uptake of those nutrients into the cells to be used as metabolic factors. So when we have a lagging muscle, let's quickly recap what we can do again. First thing I want to do is avoid the mistake of just smashing volume. It doesn't help in most cases. We need to go back to first things first, make sure the exercise selection is correct, the setup is correct, the execution is correct, and the execution is standardized so we can progressively overload. From there, we want to identify if it's a neurological or a metabolic deficit that we're trying to deal with. So if it's a neurological deficit, it's generally a lack of ability to feel said muscle. If it's a metabolic deficit, it's an inability to recover from training. That's the quickest way to break it down to those two things. Apply the appropriate strategy based on what the issue is, and you will get awesome results with your clients with that.